Hey everyone, this is Teresa from Base 10 Montessori, and today I want to show you how to do a syllable lesson Montessori style. So when it comes to AMI Montessori training, this isn't a lesson that is exactly in the AMI lesson books. Syllables would fit under a more vague category of storytelling, conversation, and all sorts of introduction to language games that you can play, but it's not a specific official lesson in the AMI album. But it's really important to include these lessons in your day-to-day experience because things like syllables and word games and rhyming, they're all part of learning how to read and write. And those skills really are fundamental. And they kind of leave it up to us in training to figure that part out on our own. So today I wanted to show you how I would turn the game Hickety Pickety into a Montessori style game. Now, a lot of you might already be familiar with Hickety Pickety because it's a great transition game. It's a syllable game. And when I've done it before, I've done it in large groups. It's usually, like I said, during a transition time. However, it's a really great game and syllables are really important to focus on in the 3 to 6 year old age group. So how can we turn this game into a small group game that the children can play on their own independently? I'm going to show you how to do that today, and I'm just going to tell you my idea of how I do it, but feel free to play around with this idea and work it for your environment. Again, we have to be flexible for our own different environments and what works for us. The first thing I would do is I would have them join me at this rug, and I would say, we are going to play a game. But look it, my rug is empty. I think for this game, I'm going to go around the room and I am going to look for 3 objects. And I am going to bring these 3 objects back to the rug, but there are a couple rules that we need to follow. First of all, the object that I bring back, I need to know the name of it. I need to know what it's called. And the second rule is that I have to treat it very carefully. So the reason why I'm choosing to do objects in the environment is for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that it helps familiarize the child to all the different items in the classroom and builds up the language, right? We're introducing a lot of language in this environment. And this game, when you play it this way, can help your student be more familiar or have more mastery over the language in your classroom. The second reason I'm going to use objects in the environment for this game is because it gives the child, especially a very young child, a chance to touch some of the materials that we usually tell them they are not ready to use yet, right? So for instance, a younger child may be looking around the classroom, and one of the things that might catch their attention is the preposition lesson. And they might really want to go over to this teapot and have a little tea party. But as a Montessori teacher, you're going to tell them, you know what? I can see you're really interested in this, but we haven't got that lesson yet, so we have to put it back on the shelf, right? That's usually what we say to a younger child who has not had this lesson. But if you use it in this context, this gives the child the opportunity to go over to a piece of work in the room that they've really been wanting to work with, but they're not ready for yet, and they can bring it back and they can use it for this lesson. So my first object for playing Hickety Pickety Montessori style is going to be the teapot. Now, another thing that might capture their attention is the golden bead system, right? Maybe the bead chains, and this is where you're going to have to set some boundaries, right? Because if they don't have a lesson to take this off the hooks and carry the bead chains, you're going to say, nope, because what's the second rule? If they haven't had a lesson on how to carry those bead chains, then they can't choose that item, right? They have to be very careful with it. And part of being careful with it is knowing how to take things off the shelf and put them back on. You do need to watch them as you present this lesson and make sure they understand the boundaries for picking objects in the classroom. So they might not be able to take a bead chain off the hook unless it's the 2 or 3 chain, and they can show that they know how to carry it carefully. But maybe instead of a bead chain, they might go over to the shelf and they might get a cube. So that might be an option. If they can carry it very carefully, right? They can carry it carefully and bring it over to the rug and they can tell you the name of it, cube. then that means they can use this material for this game. And let's see here, maybe there's a student in your classroom that has really wanted a lesson on dusting or polishing, and maybe they haven't had that lesson yet, and they've been dying to polish or dust this one object in your classroom, but they haven't had a chance yet. So maybe this is an opportunity for them to get something off the shelf that they have not had a lesson on for polishing or dusting. What if what you have on the shelf to dust or polish is a dinosaur? So maybe that's something they bring over to the rug for this. So we're going to play Hickety Pickety Montessori style and work on a syllable game with our younger children using 3 objects from the room. We are going to use a cube, a teapot, and a dinosaur. So we know all these words. We were very careful bringing them over to the rug, and so now we're ready to play our game. So let's start by learning the words to Hickety Pickety. Most of you already know these words, but here we go. I'm going to show you how this is going to go for this game. So we're going to go like this. Hickety Pickety Bumblebee. Who can clap this word for me? Choose an object, hold it in your hand, and then you can choose a student. You can say, Amelia, can you clap this word for me? And Amelia would go, cube. And you can say, yes, this is a cube. How many claps does the cube have? Let's count. Cube. That has 1 clap. Let's try the teapot. Ready? Hickety Pickety Bumblebee. Who can clap this word for me? You can choose another student and you can say, can you clap this word for me? And the student will go, teapot. Teapot. And you can say, yes, this is a teapot. How many times did we clap when we said the word teapot? Let's count. Teapot. 1, 2. That word got 2 claps. All right, well, let's try this one. Let's see. Hickety Pickety Bumblebee. Who can clap this word for me? And then you can choose another student and you can go through it and you can clap. Dinosaur. Dinosaur. Now, that's a word that might come out a little bit different. They might pronounce it all a little bit differently. They might go dinosaur or dinosaur. They might pronounce it in a little bit different ways, but it's still got the same claps, right? Sometimes when you have different words, though, the claps can come in different places depending on how they pronounce it. That's okay, because this is all about the experience. We're not going to correct any errors. We're not going to interrupt. We're just going to let them experience it. So when we do the dinosaur, we're going to count the claps. Dinosaur. Dinosaur. That's got 3 claps to it. And so this is how I would play the game Hickety Pickety. I would help them learn the words. And if you've been doing this game during group time with their names, because the original one goes Hickety Pickety Bumblebee, who can clap their name for me? If you've been playing it that way with their names and you change it up for objects in the room, they should already be pretty familiar with it. But if you're introducing this for the first time, you might want to have a piece of paper written down for your older students so that they can read it. But for your younger students, you're just going to keep going over it until they learn the words eventually and help them figure it out. Now, when it comes to playing this game, what I would encourage is for an older student to work with 1 or 2 younger students. A student that already has this down, that already understands the language in the room pretty well and understands syllables. So you could have somebody leading the game and then a couple of younger kids playing the game with them. And it doesn't have to be younger kids, because sometimes we have some older kids that really struggle with syllables, especially children who are struggling with dyslexia are going to have trouble with syllables too. So this is a great game for them to work together. It gives them the opportunity to touch things in the room and learn the language of things in the room without having a whole lot of negative consequences, right? We're giving them the opportunity to work with things in the room that maybe they have to wait a really long time to work with. And for some of you teachers out there, you might not like that idea, so you might want to put more boundaries on what they can choose, and that's okay. My only thing is I wouldn't make it to look too much like the I Spy game, because you really want to make sure that they don't mix up the purpose between the games. In I Spy, we're really learning that first phoneme sound, and with Hickety Pickety, we're learning syllables. We don't want them to confuse those two concepts. So I would try to keep this looking and feeling different than I Spy, so that we're not confusing our younger children with the purpose of the activity. Now, what I would do is I would just allow them to get this activity out whenever they want it, right? Now, they can't go over and take an object away from somebody that's working with it. So if you have somebody that's polishing or dusting an object in the room, obviously they can't take that object. And you can allow them to work together. You can say this is a 2-person game, this is a 3-person game. And of course, you can have them play this for maybe 5-10 minutes, but if it starts getting into 20 or 30 minutes, most likely they're playing with it, right? So if you see that they're starting to play with objects, like if this actually turns into a dinosaur that's eating the teapot, that's when I would interrupt and say, oh, it looks like we're playing with these materials. And you know what? These materials are for working. So we're going to put them back on the shelf because they need to be available for my friends who are ready to work with them. So that's how I would approach this game. Now, because I'm AMI trained, I have to talk about the control of error. So let's go back to our Montessori training for just a second and think about the control of error for this activity, because this is something we're thinking up, right? We don't have an album to tell us what the control of error is. We really need to think critically about, how does the child know that they're doing the work right? What's going to tell them that they're doing this work correctly? That's what I mean by a control of error. In Montessori works, they all have a control of error, and sometimes that control of error is within the material. Sometimes the control of error is within the child themselves. And what does that mean? That means that it's developmental, right? We have faith in the child that as they get older, this skill is going to come if they're exposed to it enough and if they practice it enough. So my first answer for the control of error for this activity is it's within the child, right? Just getting the experience and being around it, they're going to pick up what a syllable is. So that's my first answer, but I also have a second answer, because there is another type of control of error within the classroom that doesn't come from the teacher. It comes from the child's peers. So if the child is playing this game with an older child that understands the concept of doing syllables, then the control of error is within the other children that the child is working with. And this is where you, as the guide, may have to make suggestions, right? You might suggest to an older child that they work with a couple of younger children on this game, especially children who are struggling. In Montessori, we really like to use our students as our leaders. This is a great opportunity for that leadership. That's a great opportunity for the older children to show mastery over this skill and also build community, because sometimes that is some of the best benefits we have for helping children learn is peer leadership. So my answer for the control of error for this game is within the child, right? Trust that this is a developmental process that they're going to get. Don't be impatient. Don't interrupt. Don't correct. Trust the process that they're going to get it. It's just a matter of time. And also use other children to help correct the other children, because that is acceptable in a Montessori environment. Now, if the other children are being really harsh, really rude, or if you see that it's just having a negative impact on the other children, then yeah, I would interrupt that and say, you know what, I think we need to do something different here. But the last thing you want to do is correct the child yourself. Children don't learn as well when they get those direct corrections from the teacher. They like to learn on their own. They like to learn from friends. Those are the two best ways for a child to learn. So anyways, let me know if you try this in your classroom. Let me know how you would change it for your environment, and I'd love to hear from you. With that being said, don't forget to like this video, comment below, and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.